Hello, friends. Do you know that running a business in Montenegro is much easier than in Russia? Don't believe it? Well, let me prove it to you. First, in Montenegro, the population's purchasing power is higher. If you've ever run a business back home, I'm sure you've noticed that people's purchasing power is pretty much close to zero. At least that's definitely the case in the regions. It's very difficult to sell anything to people when most of them are working just to put food on the table. I'm not trying to say that Montenegro is paradise on earth. Of course, people's earnings here are lower than in the US or Canada, but still the purchasing power of the population is much higher than back home. First of all, the model salary in Montenegro is about twice as high as in the regions of Russia. The model salary exceeds 500 euros. Back home, I think it's no more than 200 or 300. This isn't some special salary. You can see it everywhere. The model salary is the one that most people receive. That is not counting the president, oligarchs, and so on. In Montenegro, it's higher. At least just like back home, nobody here shops at second-hand stores. But that's not all. In addition, unemployment is lower in Montenegro. On the coast, unemployment is practically non-existent. On the coast, the only people not working are those who don't want to. Yes, there are people like that here too. For example, someone might own several apartments for rent and is convinced they can easily get by without working. Things are so direza unfortunate that business in Montenegro simply cannot exist without bringing in foreign labor. In addition, a large number of tourists from all over the world come to Montenegro and spend money here. Moreover, the flow of tourists increases every year, of course, with the exception of the year 2020, but the epidemic will soon be over and everything will return to normal life. Montenegro has a growing market. Again, except for the time of the epidemic, which is almost over, Montenegro's market has grown every year. Can you say the same about the market in your home country? I don't think so. This is very important for Russian and not only Russian businesses in Montenegro. In Montenegro, for example, you came to Montenegro 10 years ago and opened a car rental business. You had a very successful business. But what is the situation in 2021? During this time, a lot of new car rental companies have opened. Perhaps there is an oversupply of cars in Montenegro. Not at all. Yes, there are more and more car rentals, but there are also more and more tourists. The number of tourists increases by 10 to 30% every year. Accordingly, if you opened a car rental business in 2010, you would find today that the level of competition is the same as it was in 2010. Even though over the years many entrepreneurs have opened the same kind of business in Montenegro, it's so easy to operate that many car rental owners do nothing to attract customers. They don't have websites, and even if someone does, 99% of them don't spend any time on promotion. So a 3-page website like that is completely useless. There's no YouTube channel. In short, they have no advertising at all. Some primitive things like Facebook posts are more than enough for them. This situation will last for a very long time. I am absolutely convinced that even in 2030, car rental owners will basically be living the same way as they do now. I think you understand that I mentioned car rentals just as an example. In other words, this is the situation in many areas of business. Moving on, in Montenegro, businesses aren't seized, unlike in some other countries. It's safe to invest in Montenegro. For example, as a comparison, in 2019, foreigners invested 700 million euros in Montenegro, and in the crisis year of 2020, by the way, it was only slightly less. There it was 500 something million. You can just Google it and compare the volume of INVI investments, let's say urgently. How much did foreigners invest in Russia? How much did foreigners invest in Ukraine? You'll be surprised. In Russia, in vast Russia, the amount invested wasn't much more than in tiny Montenegro. This confirms the assessment by foreigners that it's safer to invest in Montenegro and that doing business in Montenegro is more profitable. Next, Montenegro has relatively low taxes. Perhaps the only exception is VAT, which in Montenegro is 21%. Although, for comparison, in Croatia, VAT is 25%. But in Montenegro, the corporate income tax is low, just 9%. This is the lowest rate for this tax in Europe. And the tax on receiving dividends, that is the personal income tax, is also just 9%. Next, businesses in Montenegro are not pressured. Of course, there are inspections here as well, but firstly, not too many, and secondly, no one will extort money from you for violations you didn't commit. Next, there is minimal bureaucracy in Montenegro. Again, I don't want to say that everything in Montenegro is better than everywhere else. Probably compared to Switzerland, things are bad, but compared to Russia, there is not just little bureaucracy, there is none at all. For example, the time required for voluntary liquidation of a company in Montenegro is 1 hour. How much time would you spend closing a company in your home country? Next. In Montenegro, the competition is lower, and significantly so. The market lags behind the Russian one, which opens up certain opportunities for enterprising people. There are several reasons for this. The main one, in my opinion, is that the terrible 90s in Montenegro were much worse than in Russia, and they ended later. In the end, the country finished breaking apart into pieces 15 years after the USSR did. But are there any downsides to doing business in Montenegro? Online, you can find opinions from Russian gurus who have never tried running a business in Montenegro, have no experience in it, but who repeat dogma said by others and claim that it is supposedly difficult. They offer the following argument. Montenegro has a small sales market with only 600,000 people living in the country. Business in Montenegro is seasonal. Yes, the population of Montenegro is only 600,000 people. Is that an obstacle for business? It depends on the type of business. There are certain types of businesses for which this doesn't matter. What kinds of businesses are those? The very same ones that work in Galenjik. For example, car rentals, retail, restaurants, hotels, flower shops, veterinary clinics, dental offices, and so on. You don't need a country with a population of 140 million to fill these types of businesses with clients. Of course, there are other types of businesses that do require a large market. First and foremost, that's manufacturing. It's very difficult to manufacture any except for beer and bread in a country with a population of 600,000. You'll have to export part of your products, pay customs duties, and come up with some other solutions. In short, it's a hassle. It's better if you want to get into manufacturing to wait a few years. When Montenegro joins the EU, the market will expand from 600,000 people to 500 million. So, do you see the logic? There are types of businesses that require a large market, and there are those that don't. Just think about what kind of business you want to start. As for seasonal businesses, first of all, in Montenegro, the season isn't 5 months a year, but 10 months a year. In addition to the summer season, there is also a ski season. Secondly, there's really no difference between earning a little bit over 12 months a year or earning a lot over 6 months and then taking the rest off. As we learned back in school math, the sum doesn't change if you rearrange the terms. What else? And also, in Montenegro, it's not just easier to do business than back home. It's simply more comfortable to live in Montenegro. That's exactly why so many of our entrepreneurs move their businesses from home to Montenegro. And it's also just cheap to immigrate to Montenegro, since the cost of immigration services is the lowest in the world. The minimum capital for your company can be as little as €1. Currently, there are no refusals for residence permits. Issuance of residence permits is guaranteed. And finally, where can you find information about immigrating to Montenegro? First, check out the videos on our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions about immigration, you can always contact me. My name is Dmitry. All my contact information is in the description of this video. Thank you all for your attention, and goodbye.